and welcome to another edition of Citizens Movement Radio News. Today is Friday, 28 November 2025. I'm Katie Wechuma, ready to bring you the latest news and updates. Here are today's headlines on Citizens Movement Radio News. Mahere says government creating a haven for money laundering by extortionate bank charges. Mthuli Ncube 24-hour economy impossible because of excessive load shedding, says Gono. Zimbabwe can't achieve growth by breaking the constitution, says Timber. Now let's take a look at our stories in detail. The former Mount Pleasant MP Fatai Mahere has said the extortionate bank charges announced by Finance Minister Mthuli Ncube creates a haven for money laundering. Mahere said while in other countries banking money earns interest, in Zimbabwe citizens banking money are punished by high charges. She also criticized the government for turning a blind eye on fat cats like Wicknell Chivayo, who moves around with hordes of cash while violating banking laws. We spoke to economist Chennai Matambasere, who added on to what Mahere said and gave her verdict on the budget.
I suppose the very first thing to call out in terms of this budget is being clear about what Vision 2030 says versus what the key priorities for the government are. If you look at what they're calling the pillars and how they've allocated the budget according to the pillars, 32% of the whole budget is allocated to good governance, institutional building, peace, and security. This category includes defense, home affairs, and the office of the president cabinet. And you will find that this priority is still the same as we've seen in 2025. If you look at the budget disbursements versus allocation as at 30 September 2025, the office of the president was disbursed 101% of its budget versus sectors such as health only receiving 36% of their allocated budget as at 30 September 2025. So there is a priority around security and politics than there is around education, health. In spite of the minister announcing in his statement in Parliament that health is being given 15% allocation of the budget, which is in line with our budget declaration. But we know that even based on 20-25%, what they get allocated is not what gets disbursed. It's not, so long as it's not a key priority for this government. So even though there were claps and whistles in Parliament, the reality for Zimbabweans is that based on what actually happened in 2025, the priority remains the office of the president and defense. Then secondly, in order to achieve Vision 2030, there is a clear need for infrastructure development, whether it's energy, it's roads, it's water. It's not a secret. Zimbabwe needs to do more for its infrastructure. But when you look at the budget deployment to capital expenditure is only 2.4% of GDP. This is in spite of the fact that even ministries made a modest request, shall I add, of 800 billion ZiG. And I only say it's modest given the scale of what is required. But in spite of that request for budget allocation being around 800 billion, the Treasury has only allocated 253 billion for infrastructure development, which equates to 2% of GDP. So the development agenda is not being funded. It is being sacrificed, whether it is to maintain this supposed fiscal discipline or to be able to meet the requirements of the golden child, which is the office of the president and defense. The informal sector is being hit by a double-edged sword. On one hand, the government is recognizing that we have a buoyant informal sector apparently that is contributing 60% of economic activity, and we saw earlier in the year that this has resulted in an increased GDP. So the GDP has been readjusted based on the economic activity coming out of the informal sector. So clearly, informal sector is very important for the Zimbabwe economy. What we should be seeing then is some more cushioning, building in of resilience into this sector, given its importance and contribution to our economy. But instead, what the budget is doing is introducing more tax on the informal sector. It's introducing more surveillance on the informal sector. And in addition, where they are saying there's no tax compliance, there's heavy penalties. And yet, we know that the informal sector, income from the informal sector, whether it's the market women, the commuter operators, any kind of hustle that is happening in the economy, the hustler economy, there's no resilience. If I'm not, and so the income is not consistent. If I am not well, today, I cannot turn up at my market stall tomorrow. I do not have employers that I can send in my place. I do not have sick pay to replace. If there's any form, anything is stolen, there's any form of disaster, there's been a fire, or anything like this, or there's no cushion or resilience in the informal sector. So to really come at it with this heavy hand of tax is essentially penalizing low income households even further and pushing them even more towards the brink of extreme poverty that they are already in. So on that point as well, in terms of the tax penalties on low income households, the tax that is being presented on your own money, that to withdraw money, if you're withdrawing more than $500, there's a 2% charge, and above that there's a 3% charge. So how it's a double tax, right? So if I have earned my money and I have been taxed through other means, why am I being taxed to use it? Not only is this double taxation, but it's also it hurts the ordinary person, especially the small businesses who rely on cash and do not have the offshore accounts. They do not have, they're not part of the elite economy. So, and they're the ones that will get penalized by this. So it actually promotes a parallel economy that is away from banking, right? So I'm just going to keep my money in my pillowcase, because if I put it in the bank and trying to withdraw it, then this is going to be a problem. And we know that the only reason that this is being promoted is to encourage the digital surveillance for tax purposes. But also we know that there's been a lot of retention that happens at the point of your bank account. So the government will retain and offer you that money back in local currency, and even that isn't happening. The government still holds a huge backlog of arrears in this aspect. Okay, so there's a celebration, and there was a celebratory kind of mode, just watching the minister presenting the budget and talking about the 0.2% deficit. But this is not the real deficit, right? We have seen that if you read the public debt report, it's telling us about domestic arrears of money that is owed to local service providers. We're looking at domestic arrears that have moved from $34 million to $1.3 billion in 9 months. Now that is a huge increase, and this should be more reflected in the deficit when we speak of deficit, because these are unpaid bills to suppliers. Many of them are local traders, local SMEs, which means that essentially the state is balancing the book based on money that doesn't belong to it. It's a false economy. It's a hidden deficit, and it forces business to become more unwilling to work with government. It's also worth mentioning the public debt crisis. Zimbabwe's total public debt has now been reported as 23 billion, which we knew earlier only from the IMF. So it's good that Treasury is now giving us that true figure. Of that, external arrears alone are 7.7 billion, of which 2.5 billion are penalties. This is the extent to which we are not being able to meet our obligations. I've spoken already about the domestic debt that has shot up. 1/3 of domestic debt is now linked to the global compensation deed, which is the compensation to farmers following the Jamanja land reform. The debt maturities in US dollars are very high. Over 400 million are due every year from 2026 to 2034. The government is admitting that it can't pay, and it plans to roll these debts over. This is refinancing by necessity, not by choice. Zimbabwe is a classic case of a country in debt distress without any signals of us being able to address this in the foreseeable future over the next 5 to 10 years. So when we are speaking, when you then put this against the backdrop of us having a 55 billion GDP, which is currently the strongest economy in the region, it doesn't make sense. Something is not adding up. We must also make mention of the assumptions that are being used to calculate the growth in GDP. The budget is assuming that, for instance, in agriculture, that we're going to have a good rain season. But yet we've seen that because of the issues that we have with climate change, which is recognized in the budget, because of the fact that our infrastructure development has not been able to create adaptive methods in terms of meeting the risks presented by climate change, we really have no business stating this as a likelihood assumption. There's also the assumption of the strong mining. Now, what's is a mystery is the fact that we have global commodity prices. Gold, for example, is increasing. It's doing really well. And yet, when you look at our performance in mining between 2024 and 2025, it's actually going down. We are in decline in that sector. So what is happening globally is not representative of what will happen in Zimbabwe. So that assumption to me is flawed. It's also talking about a stable currency. Both our inflation figures, whether it's in US dollars or it's in ZiG, they are both in double digits. So that is not stability. You cannot speak of stable inflation when you're speaking of double-digit inflation figures. So that stability assumption again is flawed. So these assumptions are not realistic. They are beyond aspirational. And one climate change shock away from achieving the growth that is being stated in this.
The former Lopengula Makwekwe Member of Parliament Eric Gono has said it is impossible for the country to have a 24-hour economy because of excessive power cuts that are experienced daily. Gono said the government must address the energy crisis facing the country in order to increase productivity. He also condemned the ZANU-PF government for failing to meet its 2018 electoral promise of lighting the whole country. A senior opposition official, Senator Jamerson Timber, has said the National Development Strategy 2 announced by government looks promising on paper, but its targets of stability and good governance cannot be achieved by violating the Constitution. Timber said the issue of 2030 agenda is threatening the country's stability and investor confidence. Let's hear Senator Timber speaking.
Fellow Zimbabweans, government has announced 10 priorities under the NDS2 or National Development Strategy 2. Priorities that on paper speak to growth, jobs, devolution, and good governance. But here is the truth. No national plan can succeed while the ruling party seeks to tear up the constitution to extend power to 2030. You cannot build an inclusive economy while institutions are captured. You cannot promote devolution when it remains ignored. You cannot speak of good governance when elections face interference and ZEC is mistrusted by the majority. Zimbabwe needs constitutionalism, accountability, and genuine reform, not a 2030 power retention agenda. Our constitution is our future, and we will defend it.
A Zimbabwean activist based in Sweden, Sofia Tekwani, was reportedly raped near Zimbabwean embassy in Stockholm. According to a report by Law and Democracy Support Foundation, the incident happened on 30 December 2024. The foundation added that Tekwani and her family have been receiving repeated threats from numbers registered to the embassy. Speaking to Citizens Movement Radio's Palma yesterday, Sophie said she has been advised to go into hiding until the perpetrators are brought to justice, and thanked Citizens Movement Radio for the support and advice given. On a day 4 of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, the Citizens Welfare Team led by Senator Vongai Tome called for an end to gender-based violence, declaring enough is enough. She said GBV is a human rights violation and vowed to challenge the patriarchal norms that perpetuate violence against women and girls. Senator Tome and her team pledged to support survivors, push for stronger protective policies, and work towards a society free from fear and oppression. Let's hear her speaking.
Fellow citizens, I greet you all. And today we stand united as the Citizens Welfare Team. We believe in the able leadership of Advocate Nelson Chamisa, to demand an end to the scourge of gender-based violence. We say enough is enough. Gender-based violence is not just a women's issue, it's a human rights issue. It's a threat to our dignity, our rights, and our very existence. I will no longer tolerate a society where women and girls live in fear of violence. We will not be silenced by patriarchal norms. We will not be deterred by lack of action. We will rise, we will speak out, and we will continue to demand justice. As citizens who believe in Advocate Nelson Chamsa's leadership, we commit to creating a society where everyone can live free from fear and oppression. We will continue to support survivors, challenge harmful norms, and advocate for policies that protect women's rights. Let us march together, united in the quest for a gender-based violence-free society. Let us rise above the noise and demand change. Let us show the world that we care and that we can act and that we will not be silenced as we commemorate the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, day number 4. Stop GBV. Hashtag the new rise, and God is in it. I thank you.
ZINSEC has announced that the Grade 7 examination results are out and are now accessible from its online portal. Meanwhile, Primary and Secondary Education Minister Torirai Moyo said the results marks a third consecutive year that there were no leaked papers. Mashonaland West Women Proportional Representation MP Honorable Muta Murombezi has said the country's roads have become open graves due to large potholes. Honorable Murombezi said the Mondoro Mubaira Skyline Road is a good example of how bad roads have become under the Second Republic. She said the road is in bad state to the extent that pregnant women in a bus will have complications and premature delivery due to potholes. Let's hear Honorable Murombezi speaking.
Indeed, our roads have become open graves. Why we say so? Because a lot of lives are being lost on our roads. A lot of families are being orphaned by accidents that are happening on our roads. Therefore, our roads have become open graves. We can give an example that you said of Mondoro Mbaira Skyline Road. That road is so bad to the extent that pregnant women cannot ride a bus along that road. If they do, one would actually get into labor because of the bumps, because of the potholes, because of the bad nature of the road. Such is how bad the road is, and many of our roads in the country. So our bad roads in the country are the ones that are contributing to many road accidents. If we want to take a look at it, yes, there is driver error there and other things, but the major thing that we need to focus on to first address is the state of our roads. Our roads are death traps. Our roads are open graves. Our roads need urgent rehabilitation so that we give dignity to our people. Our people deserve dignity while traveling. You cannot travel on a road that is bumpy, that when you are in a bus, the bus will be tilting either sides, just trying to avoid big potholes and bumpy roads. So indeed, our roads are open graves. So that is one thing that we need to focus on, and I hope the budget is going to address that towards the Ministry of Transport and Road Infrastructure.
The government has been urged to re-implement the We Eat What We Kill economic policy that was introduced by former Finance Minister Tendai Biti during the days of inclusive government. This was said by renowned economist Professor Gift Mugano, reacting to the issue of ballooning national debt announced by Finance Minister Mthuli Ncube in his budget presentation yesterday. Professor Mugano said government must cut its expenditure in order to deal with both the internal and external debts that are ever growing. In our sports news, the Zimbabwe women's netball team, the Gems, lost 42-56 to Wales yesterday in the ongoing Celtic Cup in Scotland. The player of the match, Prudence Sibanda, who was playing for the Gems for the first time. This afternoon, the Gems will face fellow Africans Namibia at 4:30 p.m. Meanwhile, the Zimbabwe women's football team, the Mighty Warriors, will play against Malawi in the Three-Nation Tournament in Lilongwe, Malawi. The match will start at 5 p.m. Central African Time. Good luck to them. Harare Giants Dynamos will be looking to make it 3 in a row when they take on Triangle United in the Chibuku Super Cup final tomorrow. This year's final will be played in the Lowveld at Gipo Stadium. Dynamos players reportedly refused to train this week in protest over non-payment of winning bonuses. Triangle have won the Chibuku Super Cup before after beating Harare City in 2018. A day after parting ways with their coach Tondera Indiraya, Premier Soccer League champion Scotland announced former FC Platinum coach Norman Mapeza as their new coach. Mapeza will reportedly receive a salary of $10,000 per month and $100,000 signing on fees. Some reports say Mapeza had a pre-contract agreement with Caps United but hijacked by Scotland owner. It will be another big weekend in the English Premier League as log leaders Arsenal take on second-placed Chelsea at Stamford Bridge on Sunday. Here are the other fixtures for the weekend. Brentford versus Burnley, Sunderland versus Burnley, Manchester City versus Leeds United, Everton versus Newcastle, Tottenham versus Fulham, Crystal Palace versus Manchester United, West Ham versus Liverpool, Nottingham Forest versus Brighton, and Aston Villa versus Wolves. To conclude our Citizens Movement Radio News, here are the headlines once again. Mahere says government creating a haven for money laundering by extortionate bank charges. Mthuli Ncube's 24-hour economy impossible because of excessive load shedding, says Gono. Zimbabwe can't achieve growth by breaking the constitution, says Timber.